Welcome back. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop here with the Center Square. Been off for close to a month now and appreciate all of the outpouring of support and love and caring that all of you out there poured out onto me and my family after the passing of my wife, Megan. It's been a tough month, but knowing the impact she had on people is just incredible. And I want to thank all of you out there for your consideration, your condolences, and for your support and your patience with me. I was able to get back into work a little bit with a lot of happenings at the Illinois State House. So hopefully you were able to follow the work we do at thecentersquare.com. It's a nonprofit newswire service focused on what's going on at state houses across the country and in Washington, D.C. with Congress and the new Trump administration. But clearly we have a focus here with Illinois, and there's a lot to cover. So I've been able to dip my feet back in to bring you that coverage with the Center Square and Illinois Radio Network. It just took me a bit to gather my thoughts and get things ready for the live show. So here we are back at it on this February 24th, 2025. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. We've got a lot to cover, things to pick up on from the past few weeks that we will definitely be bringing to you on a regular basis. And even as we progress into the new General Assembly, a lot of action. We're going to be looking at some of the priorities that have already surfaced, from things like gun control laws to medical aid in dying legislation, and even the balance between equity and excellence in education. So we'll start doing some of that throughout the week. But of course, the legislature comes back in tomorrow, Wednesday and Thursday. So there's expected to be a lot of activity in committees as we've got a new General Assembly and things are going to be popping off. So we've got a lot to cover here. Hopefully you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for the Center Square here on YouTube to wake up for the live show. Get the podcast where you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus and you'll be able to find that and join us there. So glad to be back. Again, I want to thank all of you out there. The messages of support, the messages of take your time. We appreciate you. We're here for you when you get back. I can't tell you how much that means to me, to my family, to all of those who have just been impacted by the loss of Megan. She was an incredible person who, quite frankly, made me the man I am today. She took a scrappy kid from high school and turned him into somebody with drive and passion. And here I am today, sitting here because of the hard work she put into me. But clearly, it's a loss that it's going to be felt for the rest of my life. There's no question. All right, so really do appreciate all of the people pouring into the live chat as well. And that's something I want to encourage you. If you watch the program live, you can join the chat room and chat up some of the things we're discussing. So when we get back, we'll get into the governor's budget address from last week and the controversy of him talking about Nazis for 5 minutes of that speech. So stay tuned. We'll tackle that next here with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, right here with the Center Square.
Not an insult to half the American public voting for Trump when you're talking about Trump being a Nazi.
Those words never came out of my mouth. That is not true, what you just said. Here is what I will say. I think it was important to talk about the destruction of a constitutional republic.
That's Governor J.B. Pritzker responding to a question I had shortly after his budget address on Wednesday, where he spent 5 minutes of his 40-plus minute speech talking about Nazis. We'll get to some more of the fallout from those comments coming up, but let's talk about the budget. Welcome back to Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Wake up with us each and every weekday morning for the live show, breaking things down for you to understand here in the state of Illinois. And we've got another budget proposal from the governor. Last week, he delivered a $55.2 billion spending plan. It's the largest spending plan in state history. When you wrap in federal funds, it approaches $130 billion. So just think about that. It costs $130 billion of your tax money, both federal money and state money, to run the state of Illinois. And the governor's using $55.2 billion, the largest state spending plan in state history, to lay out his policies and his proposals. Now, he says no tax increases. This is just the proposal. We'll see how this works through the State House, with legislators having a May 31st deadline to actually approve a spending plan. But beforehand, some of the Republicans were anticipating what exactly the governor would be talking about. Here's State Senator Chapin Rose laying out his thoughts on the governor possibly pointing fingers as to a drop in revenue and a projected $3 billion budget deficit.
All these budget troubles started before November's election. All these budget troubles are going to be here no matter whoever won November's election, okay? So tomorrow when you hear him blame everything on President Trump, remember, President Trump had nothing to do with blowing up our state budget over the last 6 years. That was Governor Pritzker, okay? The $3.2 billion was announced the weekend before the election, if memory serves, okay? So again, hard for him to blame someone else when this all lands at Governor Pritzker's doorstep.
And a lot of the extra spending that the Republicans were critical of was extra spending on non-citizens in the states. They said it was more than $3 billion since 2021 that the state has spent on non-citizen migrants. Some saying they're here seeking asylum, others saying they're here illegally. The classifications, I don't have a complete breakdown of that, but clearly it's been an expensive endeavor for Illinois taxpayers. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but of course the Republicans were saying there's a $3+ billion deficit. How they shrank that deficit to get a proposed balanced budget, some people still don't understand, but clearly the governor lays out that the state's going to see slower revenue than it has in the past. Here's the governor from his budget and State of the State address last week.
We expect to finish this year with 5% revenue growth. But for 2026, our forecast projects a 1.9% increase. Much more modest, in part because the U.S. economy is projected to grow at a slower pace.
But Illinois has been growing at a slower pace than the U.S. economy, and even comparing our neighbors' growth. The state historically has had a higher than average unemployment rate. The variety of things that impact the states that Moody's highlighted recently. Here's the story at thecentersquare.com. So I encourage you to go check out our print side of things. Moody's economic forecast for Illinois shows troubling signs ahead. The things it talked about was the demographic trends, things like outbound migration and taxpayers leaving the state to go to other states, below average population trends and deep-rooted fiscal problems such as mounting pension obligations and a shrinking tax base present the biggest hurdles. The state's unemployment rate averaged 5.3% in the fourth quarter of 2024 compared to 4.1% for the region and the nation. On the bright side, Moody's said, the rise in Illinois' jobless rates can be partially attributed to the sustained growth of the labor force, which is approaching a pre-pandemic size. And then it goes through a whole bunch of other things, some of the regional indicators. So if you get a chance, go find that story at thecentersquare.com. Moody's economic forecast for Illinois shows troubling signs ahead. But all of that coming out as the governor recognizes they're going to see less revenue, and he's going to work to control spending in his proposed budget.
Discretionary spending is increasing by less than 1% in the FY26 budget. Other expenditures are mandatory, full pension payments, inflation on healthcare coverage, and debt pay down, for example. This proposed budget enacts cost-saving operational efficiencies, improves productivity, curtails new hiring at agencies, consolidates unnecessary segregated funds, eliminates dormant boards and commissions, and overhauls state purchasing to to save taxpayers money.
So the governor's looking to curtail spending in a variety of areas. He's looking to have a hiring freeze, ways to shore up spending. But again, still spending in his proposed budget more than he spent last year. I think it's like 31% more than he spent in 2019 with his first budget when he came into office. But as he says, he's controlling spending. There is going to be more spending in other areas.
I believe in building on what works. So despite the challenges that we're facing this year with the budget, my budget proposal increases our commitment to evidence-based funding for public education so that we can put new resources in underfunded schools first.
So if you're not familiar with the evidence-based funding model, it's essentially something came about with an agreement that they would increase funding for K-12 schools by $350 million every year. But there was an agreement to have a school choice scholarship program, the Invest in Kids program, that expired at the end of 2023, I believe. There's a lot of families that were left in the lurch, but that program's no longer in effect. So the governor talked about how he won't sign an unbalanced budget and just the overall budget outlook. He said that they're going to manage the best they can. Shortly after the budget, they started the budgeting process. The House Revenue and Finance Committee met, and they heard from the state's chief economist with the Department of Revenue on some projections as far as what federal policies may do to the state's budget.
We have the forecast assumptions, which include expected President Trump policy impacts, which are outlined below. Highlights being personal and corporate tax cuts, crackdown on undocumented immigration and deportations, and the implementation of tariffs.
So obviously the state's looking at some of the policies that Donald Trump, as a new president in his second non-consecutive term, is implementing and how that could impact the state budget. But what about that budget deficit we heard about in November? $3.2 billion budget deficit for the coming fiscal year. The Department of Revenue's director, former state representative David Harris, he laid out that, listen, I mean, the budget deficit that was projected in November could change because, well, legislators could change policies.
Some of you may have been at this meeting. Crane Chicago Business held a meeting about a month and a half ago where both Speaker Welch and President Harmon were the primary guests and the primary speakers. And President Harmon said something there, and the $3 billion number had been released. And President Harmon said something there that I thought was very accurate. And he said this, he said, look, there's a $3 billion potential deficit if we do nothing. And that's not going to happen. The governor is going to recommend a balanced budget, as he did. I would imagine that Speaker Welch and President Harmon are going to put forth numbers that lead to a balanced budget. So my point is, you, the General Assembly, in cooperation with the governor, are going to take action that ensures that there is not a $3 billion deficit.
So clearly, actions from the General Assembly could help shore up that deficit. We'll see what happens in the weeks and months ahead. Again, a May 31st deadline for them to pass a balanced budget with simple majorities. We could talk a long time about that process. I've been through at least now 10 of them. And it's a pressure campaign at the end of May every time, where it ends up popping out in the wee hours of the morning in one chamber. They vote on it by 2 or 3 in the morning, and then I've had some of the members of the press corps in commiserating on all of this, saying it feels like we're being waterboarded. But one thing that the governor is hoping to be able to do in this proposed budget is a tax amnesty program where he could say, hey, if you have back taxes, we're not going to give you any fines or penalties. Please pay those taxes.
We can give you a break. If you pay that tax liability, which you owe, you don't have that penalty that would automatically occur. So and again, it brings some dollars forward that hopefully we would collect later. We would anticipate collecting later, but this gives the taxpayer an inducement to pay it. And it's a benefit, yes, it's a benefit to us, but it's also a benefit to the taxpayers. Question about the tax amnesty program. If you look at slide 12, the taxpayers that have tax liabilities, the individual income tax, again, $30 billion in individual income taxes come in. And there's 59 million that might be received from individual income taxpayers under an amnesty program. If you look at the corporate, though, you're talking about 127 million. The corporations know that they have a liability. More so, I guarantee you, their tax accountants know that they have a liability, more so oftentimes than the individuals. So if we can give the corporations the opportunity to pay that tax liability, avoiding the penalty, the previous experience indicates they're going to take it.
So we may see 120 some odd $1 million, if not more, from corporate income taxes that are delinquent, and then an additional 30 some odd million or so. So that could be a bump to the state's budget. Again, one of the ways that there could be a reduction of that $3 billion deficit. So that was the substance of it, right? Talking numbers, talking, the state's pension obligation, the debt, and the income growth, and whether or not the state's actually going to have a balanced budget. So the governor laid all that out in his priorities. Some of the things he talked about in the State of the State: he wants to expand community college offerings to allow for 4-year bachelor degrees, but he also wants to ban the use of cell phones in K through 12 schools. So he laid out some of those policy positions that he's looking for, and he even had a push for helping lower pharmacy costs in the state of Illinois. But the last 5 minutes of the governor's 40-plus minutes State of the State and budget address last week focused on Nazis.
I do not invoke the specter of Nazis lightly, but I know the history intimately and have spent more time than probably anyone in this room with people who survived the Holocaust. Here's what I've learned. The root that tears apart your house's foundation begins as a seed of distrust and hate and blame. The seed that grew into a dictatorship in Europe a lifetime ago didn't arrive overnight. It started with everyday Germans mad about inflation and looking for someone to blame.
He went on from there to talk about how he won't bow down to a king, and talking more about Nazis. He said Nazis 6 times in his speech. He didn't say Madigan's name once. That's something else we got to talk about later this week, is unpack the Madigan conviction. That was something that happened while I was not doing the live show, so we'll have to talk with Jim Talamonte, the Center Square's reporter that was stuck in that courtroom for that 4-month trial. But anyways, he didn't mention Madigan's name. He said the former House Speaker in an impromptu part. It wasn't in the written copy of his speech, but he did mention the former House Speaker once, but he mentioned Nazis 6 times. So nothing about ethics, but he mentions Nazis 6 times.
How is it not an insult to half the American public voting for Trump when you're talking about Trump being a Nazi?
Those words never came out of my mouth. That is not true, what you just said. Here is what I will say. I think it was important to talk about the destruction of a constitutional republic.
And again, the governor answering my question, because listen, it's one thing in communication class I learned, it's not what you say, it's how people interpret it. Well, people interpreted the governor talking about Nazis for 5 minutes in his speech, and the current Trump administration, and raising a red flag and raising alarm, as the governor sees it, about the possible destruction of a constitutional republic. People interpreted that a certain way. Here's State Representative Stephen Reich, a Republican from Woodstock. He said that as it was interpreted by Republicans, the governor was casting a pretty wide net.
How is it not?
And here's Stephen Reich.
I think he went off the rails, let's just put it that way, is when he started talking about history and autocracy and things like that. He spent a disproportionate amount of time talking about things that did not affect Illinois. And he said it in a way that I was personally offended by. By implication, and about as direct as he could say it without actually saying it directly, he accused those of us on this side of the aisle of being Nazis. I want to point out a few things. There is no caucus in this House that has been more supportive of Israel through resolution and comments on the floor than the House Republican caucus. We've issued resolutions, we've proposed resolutions supporting the nation of Israel. to put not too fine a point on it, we are part of Team Jew.
So Reich talking about the Republican support for the Jewish population in the nation of Israel, and he then started talking about how the governor should know what an autocrat is like.
But for him to yesterday stand up and by implication say that autocrats are taking over this country and putting us in that same boat is wrong. And this is a guy who should know, because what was it during COVID? 40-some consecutive disaster declarations, ruling by executive order for 1,170-some days of his first 1,552 days in office.
And some would say that those executive orders and disaster proclamations continue with the disaster proclamation about the migrant crisis, because the governor kept those going. So the governor's had emergency orders for most of his now in his second term as governor. But when Reich got up on the House floor on Thursday to make those comments, some Democrats got up. One in particular, Daniel Didich, blasted Reich for what he said were borderline anti-Semitic comments.
As a Jewish American, as a Jewish member of the General Assembly, who represents one of the largest Jewish communities in the entire state of Illinois, I have spent the last year and a half with my life dominated by the rise of anti-Semitism. Among the most pernicious forms of anti-Semitism is conflating the actions of the government of Israel with Jewish Americans. Jewish Americans are diverse. We have a range of opinions about the state of Israel. I count myself as a supporter of a state of Israel. But when you say on the floor, you support Israel and that makes you Team Jew, you are engaging in among the most pernicious forms of anti-Semitism that exists. Yes, you are. You don't know what you're talking about.
So, again, just some of the back and forth and the controversy that we'll clearly be seeing throughout the General Assembly, given the governor's comments, and that all, of course, stemming from his budget address. We'll bring it to you as it continues to happen here with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join us each and every weekday morning here with The Center Square on YouTube.
There's a lot that I could say.
With the new Trump administration, there have been a lot of loggerheads with Democrat-controlled states, and that loggerheads is expected to continue. Welcome back. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and get this program each and every weekday morning as we break down what's going on in Illinois and how it impacts your bottom line. But also, one of the storylines we're going to see play out over the next at least 2 years, if not 4 years, is the Trump administration, how it interacts with states like Illinois. If you guys didn't see, the Trump administration welcomed governors to the White House last week, and the president gave a long speech about all kinds of different priorities he has, including, making sure that we end mail-in balloting all across the country, making sure we have paper ballots and voter ID and citizenship requirements and such. So, the president made those statements in front of the governors, and he then also had a moment where he was kind of combative with the governor of Maine over the gender ideology policies, because the president said there's only 2 genders and an executive order, and apparently the governor of Maine is ready to go to court against Trump, and he said bring it. He's looking forward to it. It should be easy. And he also said that her political career is over. And this was all impromptu in front of all the governors and video cameras, right? But that's not the last of that issue. We've seen other issues pop up as well. Pam Bondi, the new attorney general, her first day in office, she sued the state of Illinois, Cook County, Tony Preckwinkle, Governor Pritzker, and others over the state's sanctuary state policies. When that happened, I talked to Republican State Representative Blaine Wilhauer about the DOJ suing Illinois, and here's what he had to say.
God bless Attorney General Pam Bondi and President Trump for following through on a campaign promise. This isn't a surprise. President Trump, here's the thing, the Democrats here, J.B. Pritzker, they're complaining about all of this stuff, but Trump won on this stuff, and he won resoundingly. People want to be in a state where we put our own citizens first. We've got people in Chicago and all over the state that are absolutely struggling. We've got over a $3 billion hole in our budget. We've got major problems here, and people are sick and tired of J.B. Pritzker prioritizing illegal aliens over Illinois citizens, and this is all done just because he's trying to run for president in 2028, which I think is hilarious.
So again, you've got the DOJ suing the state, Republicans applauding that. I talked with Democratic State Representative Edgar Gonzalez Jr. out of Chicago, and he said that this was all for show. And he also talks about the other actions that Pam Bondi's taking to withhold federal funding from the DOJ to states and jurisdictions that have sanctuary policies for non-citizen migrants.
The Trust Act and other acts, they already allowed for ICE to be able to collaborate with law enforcement if and when there is actual criminal cases. For civil enforcement, that was the only reason why they would keep things separate. So honestly, this is it's redundant. This is absolutely not necessary. The only thing it does is it creates fear, it creates panic. But Chicago, Illinois, everybody was already expecting it. We expected DOJ, we expected the Trump administration to try to sue us because all they're trying to do right now is make a point. It's completely irresponsible, and at the same time, so Illinois is a donor state. The federal government relies on our tax revenue. If they do things like this, it really doesn't make it a compelling case for Illinois to help contribute in that way to the federal government. If they want us to be helpful, then they can't be cutting us off.
So again, Edgar Gonzalez, seeing the Trump administration suing Illinois over sanctuary state policies as just for show, and trying to push back on the idea of withholding federal funds for states that have sanctuary policies. But again, Blaine Wilhauer said bravo for withholding federal funds from jurisdictions that have sanctuary policies for non-citizen migrants.
That's the withholding funds is the only thing that's going to get those folks' attention. This is really easy. We can solve this tomorrow. End the sanctuary state status, comply with what the immigration law in this country is, and we can get things back on track, because we can't afford this. Outside of the morality of the situation, we can't afford it. So
Wilhauer clearly, again, applauding the federal government's actions under the Trump administration to try and withhold some funds. Now, one thing that you can find at thecentersquare.com is how much actually is being spent on certain nonprofits that go out and fund different types of immigrant services like legal services and such, and it's up there. It's $60 million to one organization and so on. But the Trump administration is working to withhold some of these funds and freeze some funds so they can do deep dives with, say, like the Department of Government Efficiency. Should Illinois have a Department of Government Efficiency? I asked Democratic State Representative Marcus Evans Jr. out of Chicago about that, and here's his response: is whether we should have a real-time audit of state spending.
We're already moving in the right direction here. This budget deficit is the reality of government operations, and we're going to figure it out. But that Elon Musk department is not necessary here in Illinois. We're doing good things in Illinois. I don't want to be distracted by some of the nonsense that's going on with this new administration. My hope is that they discard the Elon Musk department and focus on really fixing this country. We have a lot of issues that are not controversial. We have infrastructure. We have to get human services for our seniors. We have child care for our children. Let's focus on what's really important. The election is over. Okay, I want the Trump administration to start focusing on fixing America.
But part of the election that Trump won was to get in there and cut. That's what he's doing with the Department of Government Efficiency. A lot of lawsuits flying all over the place, but Republicans in Illinois say it's far beyond time for a similar effort in the state of Illinois to take a fine-tooth comb to every penny and every tax dollar that the state of Illinois is spending. Again, especially as the governor's prepared to spend the largest state spending plan in history, $55.2 billion he proposed last week. Here's State Representative Amy Ellick, the Republican from Alton.
I do think there should always be a fine-tooth comb going through every Illinois tax dollar. I'm a member of the Legislative Audit Commission, and we see audits after the fact, right? The errors, the problems have already occurred. Let's make sure that we're addressing those on the front end and being really efficient and effective with the citizens of Illinois' tax dollars. They deserve that. It is worthwhile, and that's what we're fighting for, and making sure that people have efficient use of their tax dollars. Let's find those low-hanging fruit, as they say. We know they're there. I suspect the departments would say the same. As we go along our appropriations hearings over these next couple months, those are the questions we're going to be asking. What have you determined within your department that you're able to cut back on, reduce, and reorganize?
So Amy Ellick, being on the Legislative Audit Commission, sees audits after the fact, and they're going to do what they can as Republicans in the minority on these appropriations committees to delve into how much money's going where and what is it for, and can there be efficiencies somewhere. State Representative Brad Halbrook got up on the House floor last week and talked about a new caucus that is forming at the State House to focus on efficiencies within state government.
This bipartisan effort marks our commitment to alleviating the financial pressures of our constituents by reducing government expenditures and tackling inflation. As the governor prepares to deliver the State of the State and the budget address tomorrow, the 19th, it's imperative to recognize this is a pivotal moment of embracing sustainable fiscal policies. On the national stage, the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, sets a precedent by pioneering cost-saving measures while maintaining and even enhancing service delivery standards. Parallel to DOGE's mission, we envision a similar roadmap for Illinois by adopting these proven methods to our unique needs and circumstances. This is why I urge my colleagues to co-sponsor Leader John Cabello's HB 1266, which establishes the Illinois Department of Government Efficiency to bring accountability and cost-saving measures to our states. The time for fiscal responsibility is now. Illinois cannot afford more reckless spending, more borrowing, and more crushing taxes.
So again, will there be an Illinois Department of Government Efficiency that Republican State Representative John Cabello's proposing? Will there be more members and even bipartisan membership of the Illinois DOGE caucus? We'll be watching on the ground at the state capitol. Wake up with us each and every weekday morning with Illinois in Focus with the Center Square. Get the podcast where you get podcasts. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell here. Each and every weekday morning, live to tape with you. I'm Greg Bishop. Thank you so much for being part of the program. Hasn't been much movement on the lawsuits against Illinois' gun and magazine ban in the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. It's just sitting there. We have yet to get a schedule on what kind of hearing there could be, let alone a briefing schedule. If you remember, back in January of 2023, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker signed a bill that started as insurance legislation, and then it turned into a sweeping ban of more than 170 semi-automatic rifles, shotguns, and handguns, and magazines over certain capacities. Tons of lawsuits. The ones that really made it to where we're at now, down in the Southern District of Illinois. Consolidated cases. You had the case under the Barnett label. These 4 different cases brought together, and ultimately, after months and months and months of preliminary actions and it bouncing all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, it was bounced back. And then on the merits, the district judge, Stephen McGlynn, out of East St. Louis, said that the law was unconstitutional, but he put a hold on his order until the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals then essentially re-upped that order. So the law is still in effect while it's being challenged in court, and it's in the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals on the merits. Will that be heard? We shall see. But you also have the U.S. Supreme Court that put the Snopes case. This is a case challenging Maryland's gun ban. That's gone all the way through the judiciary, right? It's gone through the district court and through the appeals court. Now it's in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, and they were in conference with the Snopes case on Friday. The U.S. Supreme Court says that, let's see here, let's go ahead and pull it up. The order list should have come out as we're here live about 5 minutes ago. So we're going to see if we can find this really quick with the order list. So zoom in a little bit on this. Let's do a search for Snopes. I am not seeing it. All right, so apparently the Snopes case may not be... Trying to search Maryland. Yeah, not seeing it. I'm not seeing the Snopes case on the order list from today. Maybe some of you in the live chat, if you do see it, you can point it out to me. But yeah, I'm not seeing the Snopes case unless I'm spelling something wrong. But yeah, nothing. So we wait for the U.S. Supreme Court to decide on that. If they don't take the Snopes case, that may put more pressure on the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. And I'm not a lawyer, right? I'm just a neutral observer watching what happens as a reporter. But I've been tracking this case. So if they don't take the Snopes case, that could mean Illinois' case, which is both a gun and magazine ban challenge. It could make its way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, but will it be a 2025 case or could it be a 2026 case? Again, things that we're watching closely. So not sure what's going to happen with the gun ban cases. Illinois' case still lingering in the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. Now, one of the news stories that prompted legislators at the Illinois State House to ban semi-automatic firearms was that horrific mass shooting in Highland Park during an Independence Day July 4th parade. Well, the suspect, the accused in that, Robert Crimo III, the trial starts today. They got jury selection underway. So that's something else that we're going to have to watch closely because that was used as the impetus to ultimately bring about legislation banning the sale and possession of these semi-automatic firearms. But if you go even back into the history of that, and again, we watched that, we tracked this story from the days after it happened with police coming out saying that the suspect they had in custody had a FOID card, a firearm owner identification card, despite having local police notify state police that this was a person who might be ineligible for a FOID card, right? So you had state police say all their policies didn't allow for it because the cases weren't still lingering. So they went ahead and dismissed this report from local police that should have prevented him from getting a FOID card, but he still got a FOID card anyways and was able to purchase the firearms allegedly used in the case. So the Crimo case is going to start with jury selection. There's going to be a lot of eyeballs on that up in the northern Illinois area. But you've got a ton of other cases that I want to update you guys on. The mass transit carry ban case where you had a district court chastise prosecutors for saying that his decision to ultimately allow for 4 plaintiffs to have concealed carry on mass transit, saying that the law was unconstitutional in regards to these 4 individuals who sued. The attorneys came back and said, hey, the Schoenthal case, if the judge allows 4 people to carry on mass transit, you could see an increase of shootings. And then they pointed to another story that happened like 4 days after the fact, and it was a shooting where 2 people were shot and killed on a Chicago subway. The judge chastising those attorneys for that. But regardless, we do have that case now in the appeals court. And they have a briefing schedule. So they're going to be looking at March 14th. The Schoenthal plaintiffs, they're going to have to file their briefs in the appeals court. And then the state actors are going to have to file by April 4th. So we do have a timeline for the Schoenthal case when it comes to the issue of whether or not you can carry concealed on mass transit. Then you have another gun ban case. This is the Bevis versus Naperville case. This case has been going up and down the judiciary as well. And actually, the Bevis case preceded Illinois' gun ban, right? Because Naperville had the gun ban go into effect. Robert Bevis with Law Weapons, he sued back in November of 2022. And then he modified his case to wrap in the state's gun ban as well. Well, we have a district court schedule where disclosures, they were filed in December, but then you've got discovery that's going to be filed by April 30th this year. May 7th is going to be some status hearings that are going to be set. Then initial disclosures, May 16th. Rebuttals expected July 15th. And then August 1st through the 31st, depositions are going to happen. So that's a long runway all throughout this year for the Bevis case to actually be dealt with in the district courts. Again, he sued back in 2022. Look at your calendar. It's 2025. So courts take a long time with these things. The Veramontes case, another case challenging a gun ban out of Chicago. That case was argued in the appeals court. We're still waiting for the appeals courts to make a determination on that. So that was back in November 12th when they heard that case in the appeals court. Again, we are waiting to see what happens with the Veramontes case. We also had a district judge, state-level judge, a White County judge in Illinois, determined that the firearm owner ID card for firearms in the home was unconstitutional. And there's been a lot of talk about this case as well. The case against Vivian Brown, that as well has bounced up to the Illinois Supreme Court, down, and back up to the Illinois Supreme Court, and then down. 2 times. So now it looks like the 3rd time the Illinois Supreme Court's going to get this case. Will they actually decide on the merits, or will they find some procedural issue? They're not sure. One thing that did happen also while I was away from the live show, Karina's Law got signed. That's the bill that would ultimately say, and will, after 90 days of it being signed, require police to confiscate firearms from individuals who are subject to domestic orders of protection. Not convicted of domestic abuse, but domestic orders of protection. Here is some moments from the signing of that, where Governor J.B. Pritzker put ink to paper and put his signature on Karina's Law. And then you get State Representative Maura Hirschauer.
This policy sends a clear message to those living through trauma and the terror of domestic violence. Here in Illinois, we see you. You have the absolute right to leave your abuser, and we will do our best to keep you and your family safe. And most importantly, here in Illinois, we value your life and the life of your families more than we value your abuser's gun.
But a lot of the argument is that this is an issue about due process. This is an issue about the Second Amendment and how some of these laws try to curtail those rights. I chatted with Illinois State Rifle Association's Ed Sullivan briefly the day Karina's Law was signed, and he continued to share his ongoing concerns about the law.
It was telling in the floor speech that Representative Hirschauer said that we get a finding of fact without a hearing, and then they get a hearing 2 weeks later. So she directly went against what Rahimi said, and so I think that's going to be a problem should someone move forward with a lawsuit. And so that was really our concerns is due process. How can you take away someone's firearm without giving them a court case? And so here we are. That's what they're trying to do.
So Sullivan reiterating the concerns he's shared about this law since its inception. But a domestic violence awareness group, a group who fights for victims of domestic violence. They were at the bill signing ceremony, spelling out what they believe were some concessions made to gun rights supporters about who should be able to possess these firearms that are confiscated from somebody who's the subject of a domestic order of protection.
We did include a provision in the final language that allows for a third-party transfer petition process, so that once the firearms are relinquished to law enforcement in that immediate kind of urgent time frame, there's a process for those firearms to not stay with law enforcement, but to go to someone else who the judge has decided is okay to have possession of those firearms.
So was that enough of a concession? Again, Sullivan talking about just the overall problems they have with this legislation, and now it's law. After the governor signed it a couple of weeks ago, 90 days, it goes into effect.
Our problem that we have, that once again, I think was easily fixed, is how do you get your firearms back when an order is dismissed? And so if an order expires or an order is dismissed, so let's say the same person goes back and the judge says, yes, more information because you didn't have due process, and now I'm dismissing this order. The person, the respondent, has to file to get their firearms back. But you can't get your firearms back until you get your FOID card back. And so there's no easy mechanism to get your FOID card back. And everybody that has tried to go through this for just simple issues, it could take months to a year to get your FOID card back.
It's pretty remarkable to think about, too, right? I mean, the idea of a FOID card still being challenged in the courts, as we talked about with Vivian Brown's case. Gun Save Life have a case pending in a state appellate court. The U.S. Supreme Court did turn around a case challenging, I believe it was Maryland's, gun ID law. So that's not necessarily something that's going to be tackled by the U.S. Supreme Court unless maybe an Illinois case gets up there, right? So still a lot of moving pieces when it comes to gun control laws in the state of Illinois. Tomorrow, we'll talk about the first hearing of the new Illinois House Gun Violence Prevention Committee. Right? They have an actual committee they created about gun violence prevention, and they took up a couple of bills for subject matter. So we'll hear a little bit about that tomorrow. One deals with an e-trace program for firearms. Another one deals with making sure that those who have stalking convictions in their past aren't able to get a firearm owner ID card. There's other bills in there about FOID owners' fees and peace officer training and safe gun storage. We've heard about that one, and pediatricians wanting to get involved in whether or not kids are told about safe gun storage in their homes. I mean, there's a lot going on that this gun violence prevention task or House committee in the Illinois House can tackle. But Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, whenever the bill for Karina's law was signed, she talked about the Trump administration and how she believes Illinois is going to stand up against the Trump administration when it comes to firearms laws.
Over the last few days, the White House has begun the process of rolling back common sense gun safety policies that so many survivors and advocates fought for years to enact. And Donald Trump did this knowing that it would put more lives at risk. The Trump administration has made their disdain for the victims and survivors of gun violence clear. Our administration is making our dedication to Illinois' victims and survivors unmistakable. Every Illinoisan, every American deserves to be safe. And today, we reaffirm that we stand with survivors and advocates who will continue this work. And we will keep doing everything in our power to protect the people of Illinois, because we are not going back.
So
not on our watch.
That's Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton talking about how she sees the Trump administration's handling of the Second Amendment and guns being problematic for Illinois. Wake up with us each and every weekday morning here with Illinois in Focus Daily, and we'll keep you updated on that and so much more. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, join the live show, live to tape each and every weekday morning. Get the podcast where you get podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter at thecentersquare.com. that's all I got for you today. Longer show than typical. We're running like 50 minutes here. Really do appreciate that. Listen, I got to play catch up with a lot of things. We're going to be looking at legislation coming up. We're going to tackle a bunch of House hearings. Because as the legislature gets into full force heading into the end of spring session, stuff's going to be flying at us hard and fast. So be sure to wake up with us and get your coffee, hang out, and stay up to date with what's going on in Illinois. I'm Greg Bishop. Again, I want to thank all of you for being with me in spirit over the past month. It's been tough. There's no question. When you lose somebody that's you spent 27 years of your life with, it definitely has it's going to have a long impact. But I also want to thank everybody who donated to the Chatham Area Public Library, the Friends of the Chatham Area Public Library. It's a library that Megan worked at for years as a reference librarian, helping people get all kinds of information. And we've raised $6,000+ for that institution, and I imagine more money's going to come in. So really do appreciate you guys and the outpouring of support and the love. It's spectacular. So thank you guys again for being with me each and every weekday morning here, Illinois in Focus Daily. Let's do it. All right, let's get back into action and keep you guys updated with what's going on. I got to get out of here and get that news planner together and start getting some reporting done. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock Central Time.